Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Today I'm here to talk about life stage nutrition because it was a request from one of the people who watch this page. So life stage nutrition is basically the idea that puppies need different food than adult dogs. Adult dogs need different food, or the composition of the food has to be different for senior dogs. And the same goes for cats, and the same goes for horses, because at different life stages you have different nutritional requirements, just as babies have different nutritional requirements than adults. Morning, Monica. I think you were the one that requested this video, actually, now that I think about it. I'm going to go through dogs and cats because I don't have the information for horses. I went through my nutritional course that I took, and these are the basic facts from there. So we know that, and puppies and kittens are similar in most effects, so I'm going to talk about both. Puppies and kittens go through what's called a rapid growth phase when they're little, because their bones are getting put together and they're getting bigger and stronger quite quickly. And I know this from Kaya because the first time I saw her, she was about a month and a half old, and she was probably, this big. And the next time I saw her, she was, 10 pounds. By the time we picked her up, she was 17 pounds. So they definitely do grow quite quickly. But essentially, puppies and kittens need what's called highly digestible protein. There's a dog across the street barking, so if you hear that in the background, that's what it is. But essentially, you have to give them food that's high protein, because they need a lot of the energy to help them grow, because they go through food very quickly. At that age, that's why most of them pig out, what they call it, when they put the food down and all the puppies start eating. But at approximately 4 weeks, for puppies, you have to start supplementing real food. And yes, the mother still has to have more energy, because she's obviously producing more milk, more supplement in her body, and the probiotics that come from her milk for the babies, especially if it's a really big litter. When they're pregnant, you have to give them more protein to make sure that they're getting all their nutrients, but also make sure to balance their calcium to phosphorus ratio, because if they don't, the bones may grow either too strong or too weak, meaning they are less pliable when they're moving around. And if they don't get enough, then their bones are brittle. And I've actually worked on a couple of puppies that when they're really little, they either fell down the stairs or something, and they're already starting with damaged bones. That had to reset them, but I started working on them to help reknit the bone faster so it could start growing with the rest of the bones normally. But the normal ratio is approximately 1:1. It can go up anywhere up to 1.8 calcium to 1 phosphorus, according to the class that I took. Puppies also have a higher requirement for the amino acid arginine, which a lot of amino acids come from food, but there's quite a few of them that don't, and they do have to be supplemented into the diet, which is really important. A common question I get asked about food is, how many meals should my dog or cat be eating a day based on their age? And the general rule is it depends on a case-by-case basis. Kaya eats 3 meals a day, and she is almost 4, but she did have some digestive issues, and we found that by feeding her less amounts of food more often, it helps smooth out everything in her digestive tract. But usually by approximately 6 months, most dogs go from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day. I do have a lot of clients that only feed their dog once a day, which you can also do. It depends what kind of diet you're following. Typically, people who feed kibble feed usually 2 or 3 times a day. People who feed raw or home cooked sometimes make one big meal. But I was watching the Holistic Pet Health Conference is going on this week, so I've been keeping up with their videos throughout the week. And the one yesterday was talking about how often you're supposed to feed and things like that. And Oprah's vet did a video, Dr. Barbara Royal, and she said that essentially if your dog is following their ancestral diet, intermittent fasting is actually a good idea. So you can go up to a day without feeding your dog and they will be perfectly fine, because in the wild, some days they catch prey and some days they don't. So the idea is that some days their stomach will be full because they'll have lots of food, but it will also contain things like bones and fur and all of that stuff, which is called a whole prey diet. But when it comes to the periods when they don't catch prey, then their stomach is empty for a little bit. And she says that with her dog, she has quite a few, that she'll feed them at different times every day, so they're not expecting the food, and then they're less demanding. I know a lot of us who feed their dog a standard 2 or 3 meals a day, as soon as it gets anywhere near the time that they're supposed to eat, they, start getting nosy, and they come over and say, hey, is it time yet? Is it time yet? So I'm not sure if I'm going to try this with Kaya, but it's just something to be considered, because if you are feeding a more ancestral prey or raw-based diet, then this is definitely an option. Supported by vets. There you go. All right, for seniors, their metabolism slows down because they're older and they don't need as much energy. So biologically, let me finish this thought and then I will answer your question, so my train of thought keeps going. The idea is that there should be 20% less calories in the food. A lot of people feed more fat to their seniors, and that's why they do get a little bit chubbier. But you do have to make sure that the calcium to phosphorus ratio stays the same, because if you take out the calories, a lot of times that ratio dips. And if it does, it's very common for seniors to get hip dysplasia, especially in breeds like German Shepherds, any of the barrel-chested high hip dogs. And to add joint supplements and fiber to seniors, because a lot of them, when their metabolism slows, they have a hard time digesting the food. So adding a little bit of fiber helps to keep everything solid so it comes out nice and smooth. But the joint supplements are really important. A lot of sporting dogs and really active dogs need joint supplements anyway. I know a couple of young dogs about Kaya's age that are on joint supplements because they're either a sporting dog, they're just active and they play all the time, or they swim and they hike and they are a hunting dog and all of that kind of stuff. So know your breed, know how much activity that they're experiencing, but do remember, pet doesn't have to be a senior for you to supplement their diet, because essentially you're working at, am I waiting until the issue occurs before I start supplementing, or am I using a more preventative approach and starting to supplement a little bit earlier? Monica's question, what are your thoughts on raw food from puppy to senior? I've been told not when they're senior. The only food Willow can eat is raw. Otherwise, her tummy explodes. I've seen puppies that eat raw. I find it has to be a little more mellow. From what I've seen lots of puppies that are raw fed, because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and there's breeders that specifically only feed raw, so that when the puppies get purchased or adopted, that they start raw fed. So they're 3 months, 4 months, and they are on raw. But when you start them that young, you have to make sure to add probiotics and prebiotics, because otherwise they may have a hard time digesting it at first. So I know when I first switched Kaya, she was super excited about the food, which is another big thing. But because kibble is easier to digest, even though they're not really supposed to have carbohydrates that much, the raw, they like it, so they don't have the enzymes in their mouth that we have to break down carbohydrates, but to break down meat, they actually shred it in their mouth. Kai doesn't really chew because she loves her food so much, but adding the prebiotics and the probiotics would definitely help if you were going to do it as a puppy. For seniors, I have seen seniors who are on raw, and most of them do okay, but again, you have to make sure to add the extra fiber, because most of the fiber comes from carbohydrates in traditional diets. So when you switch to raw, you do have to make sure to add the fiber in and the prebiotics and probiotics for the seniors. Her other question, do you like any particular joint supplements? I find most of them are filled with glucosamine and chondroitin, which are great. They work really well for joints. Sometimes they are chemically formulated rather than from natural sources. Personally, I don't give Kaya any joint supplements yet, but I have had turmeric is really good for inflammation. It's a natural spice, and it's also anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, all that stuff. And ginger, because I usually tend to go for the more kitchen-based, let's call it, supplements. So if you can actually combine the two, turmeric and ginger, usually for a dog that weighs about 60 pounds, I give half a teaspoon of each if they eat twice a day. They get half a teaspoon with breakfast and half a teaspoon with dinner. But if they eat more, obviously you give them a little bit less per meal. But it just helps to boost their immune system, strengthen the joints, everything like that. And it's usually a lot cheaper than joint supplements. But again, I'm not a vet or a holistic vet, so do make sure to talk to them first before giving them something new. But it's always a good idea. Okay. Omega-3s are also really important. Puppies, because it's for brain and neurological development. Usually if the diet is fish-based, it does have some omega-3s in it, but for seniors, definitely, especially if they have a neurological condition or their genetic history has a history of neurological conditions, seizures, things like that. It helps with healthy brain function and everything like that. And honestly, a lot of raw diets don't have the levels of omega-3s that the animals actually need. So even for Kaya's, she eats what's called Back to Raw, and it's a I think it's a local brand actually of raw food, and it comes mixed with fruits and vegetables and all that good stuff in it, but it doesn't have omega-3s. So I have to buy a separate, and I read this yesterday actually in the one of the conference videos, that fish-based omega-3s are not as great as the nutritionist once thought for pets because of the high levels of mercury in a lot of the fish. So going for a more vegetable-based omega-3, they don't recommend olive oil either, because sometimes the places they come from, the toxins that are on the skin of the olives gets into the food. But the one I give Kai is called camelina oil. I always feel like I say that wrong. But it looks exactly like it comes in a bottle just like olive oil. But so far Kai's really like that one. It doesn't have a weird smell, which is also nice. But you can buy the little size bottle or the big size bottle, and I just pour a splash every time I feed her, because I do feed her 3 times a day. But usually it's over the day they need like a tablespoon. So I give her a little bit with each meal. Monica, great recommendation. I love a more holistic approach. Yes, but also because people say raw feeding and supplementing is so expensive, but if you can go to the local bulk barn, buy the spices, and come back and mix them together, or just take like a teaspoon in each and just do this in the food, then it saves you a lot of money. But you're also going to get the other benefits from those spices. The dog's still barking. Camelina oil, yes, I love it. I used to have Kai on a different one, but since I switched it, she seems to like it a lot more. Okay, going on to cats. Before this, there's another dog walking by, the dog outside, so now the dog's barking again. Mostly the cats are the same as dogs. In terms of basic requirements, they do reach skeletal maturity at 10 months, meaning that calcium phosphorus ratio for that first 10 months is so important if you want their bones to be really, really strong. So making sure to balance it out. A lot of foods have high amounts of calcium but not enough phosphorus, so making sure you have that balance is really important. Of course, being cats, they also need taurine. supplementation, which some pet foods have. I don't see it very often in raw food for cats. So sometimes you do have to buy it separately and put it in. Super important, but kittens that are fed an all-meat diet, what they've noticed is that the calcium in their diet goes down while the phosphorus goes up. And in an all-meat diet, that's really dangerous, especially when they're kittens, because they need that bone strength, especially because the cat skeleton tends to be a little more flexible, just in terms of movement in the spine and everything like that. They also have a high sulfur requirement, which again doesn't come in a lot of cat food. So making sure that they're supplemented with all the important nutrients during those life stages is really important. Another common thing, and I know I did a post about this recently, one of the most common issues for cats in general is kidney or renal issues. And I've seen it probably half a dozen times within the span of a year. And are cats more prone to tummy issues, or is it something lacking in their diet? I find because there's more things you have to supplement into the diet that aren't found in most pet foods, like the cheap ones that most people feed their pets. If you feed a really high quality raw, it's going to have more of those things, necessary things in it. But usually it's just things that they're missing. For kidney renal issues, usually because people think cats are omnivores and they feed them kibble. Cats are not omnivores. They are obligate carnivores, and they are built to only digest meat. And stop. Because so many people feed their cats carbohydrates, it results in a lot of kidney issues because they can't filter everything out because they're not built to. But when people switch to a raw or meat-based diet for their cats, they notice that the kidney issues suddenly disappear. So if you are feeding kibble to your cat, you can do a kidney flush or add supplements that help to strengthen the kidney, and that will definitely help. But ultimately, the best thing you can do is change their food, because I'm going to say this every time somebody brings it up, cats are obligate carnivores. They need meat. They are not built to digest anything else. They're not supposed to have dairy either. It can cause a lot of bloating. But with cats, you have to be very careful, because even some raw foods have, like rice or grains in it, and you really want like the flat, very little grains. If you are going to add something like fiber, make sure it comes from a vegetable instead of a carbohydrate. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about life stage nutrition. Of course, for pregnant or lactating females, that's a different story. More energy, things like that. And as they go through their pregnancy, they need different levels of different vitamins to make sure they're reaching the requirements. But that is very complicated and probably out of my area of expertise. Is there a raw cat food you could recommend? Most of the really high quality raw foods I know are for dogs. I think there's some. I will look into it for you, because I think most of the ones that I know and the brands that I've tried are for dogs. But I think some of them would work if they don't have carbohydrates in it and the balance of amino acids is right. You could use it for both, because if it's all meat-based, it should be fine. But I'll have to, when I go pick up Kaya's food from the lady who does holistic nutrition, I will talk to her, because she probably knows more about cat food. I know a lot about dog food, but cat food, not so much. Thank you for tuning in. That was, I feel like I just ranted for a little while. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your Tuesday. Next week, we are talking about teeth growth, which I think was your other recommendation for a video, because a lot of people know about, cutting nails and basic hygiene and stuff like that. But there's usually a lot of misconceptions about teeth, so something to keep in mind. Enjoy the sunshine this week. It's supposed to be really beautiful, and I will see you next week.